It's 11 o'clock. It's Sunday morning, March 24th, 2019. Good morning to you, or good evening to you, depending on where you are. Hope you've had a lovely weekend and you're in fine fettle this Sunday morning. Lovely weekend here in Manchester. The sun is shining today, a bit breezy outside, but it's lovely. Lovely to be with you. This is Sunday View. Of course, I'll be talking about the front pages of the Sunday newspapers. We will eavesdrop on one or two of the mid-morning political talk shows as well. Try to make a little bit of sense of what's going on, or maybe not. And you'll participate, of course, by tweeting the programme right now. The Twitter handle is, well, you know what it is. Sunday View, then.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Yes, one or two buttons are stuck. There's a stuck button in the studio. We don't mind. Stuck buttons are not going to stop us. Tweet the programme right now. Thanks for joining me. Lots to talk about, as usual.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yeah, it's no good when you have a stuck button, you know. I have to get that fixed. That is something that has to be repaired. Something else that needs to be repaired. Lovely weekend. Went to Reddish Vale yesterday. My Mancunian listeners will know all about Reddish Vale. It's a lovely country park. We love it there. A great country park. Lovely place to be when the weather was as lovely as it was yesterday. It was terrific to be out and about yesterday. It's good for the soul, good for the spirit, good for the karma, good for the chakras. If somebody had said to me way back when, there'll come a time, Richie, when you'll broadcast a current affairs radio show and you'll mention chakra and you'll be serious about it, I would have told them, jog on. Love Reddish Vale. Check it out if you haven't been there before. There's a lot being made this morning about a march in London yesterday. The Put It to the People march. You could interpret that particular phrase or phraseology any way you want. Put it to the people. Haven't politicians and the captains of industry been putting it to the people since time immemorial? Haven't they? Really? Anyway, the Put It to the People march. Apparently 1 million pro-Remain folks marched and demanded a second referendum. Did they? Did they now? Did they? Well, if history is anything to go by, they'll be disappointed, won't they? Because across this country and Northern Ireland, back in February 2003, more than 3 million people came out. You remember this, of course, the anti-Iraq war protests, the march to stop the imminent war on Iraq back in February 2003. More than 3 million people came out. The lying, toading, whoring, fecking media back in the day said it was 1 million, but that was a lie. It was at least 3 million. And what happened? Diddly squat happened. Diddly squat. Mass murdering satanic psychopath Tony Blair took the decision to go to war anyway, and along his merry way, he only murdered 1 million Iraqis, made another 1 million homeless, and condemned another 1 million to a slow death from cancers in the future. So don't get too excited, Remainers, about your march. Yeah, I'm no idiot. They're going to get what they want, aren't they? We'll talk a little bit about that now. 4 minutes past 11, 4 minutes past the hour. The papers dominated by Brexit and by the future of Theresa May. What's new, Rich? Well, nothing's new, because for at least the last 2 years, the newspapers have been, the Sunday ones anyway, dominated by this unholy mess that we've come to call Brexit. Let's jump straight in and look at Murdoch's Sunday Times. Sunday Times headline, Cabinet coup to ditch May for emergency PM. Cabinet coup to ditch the Prime Minister and put in place an emergency Prime Minister. Is that a job that anybody can apply for? The emergency Prime... I'd love to be the emergency Prime Minister. just for a half an hour. I could do a lot in a half an hour. In a half an hour, one of the first things I do is I would get the little computer that controls all of the UK's ballistic missiles. I would press a few buttons and they would move to the right and they would be aimed at Tel Aviv. First thing I would do, get the fuck out of Gaza. I've only got a half an hour, but if you're not out of Gaza in a half an hour, I'm going to... Or I should say get the fuck out of Palestine, shouldn't I? But we'll talk a little bit about Palestine later on, and Israel and the Golan Heights. Let's stay with Brexit. Cabinet, I would never fire missiles on any country, by the way. I'm a genuine pacifist, would never wage war on any country. I would certainly never harm a hair on any innocent person's head. So no, I wouldn't fire on Tel Aviv. The threat, you see, would be there. The threat. Hopefully they would believe the threat, because if they didn't, well, yeah, I'd look like a bit of an arsehole then. But anyway, the Sunday Times, cabinet coup to ditch May for emergency PM. This is Tim Shipman writing in the Times this morning. Apparently government ministers are moving to get rid of May and replace her with her deputy David Lidington. In a frantic series of private telephone calls, writes Tim Shipman, senior ministers agreed the Prime Minister must announce she is standing down, warning she's become toxic and erratic. And that she's gone haywire. Maywire. She's gone Maywire. As up to 1 million people marched on the streets of London against Brexit yesterday, May's fate was being decided elsewhere. The Sunday Times spoke to 11 cabinet ministers who confirmed they wanted May to make way for someone else. And they're mentioning Lidington. The plotters plan to confront her tomorrow at a cabinet meeting, and they will demand that she announces that she's quitting. If she says no, which is likely, they will threaten mass resignations or publicly demand her head. This is actually Tim Shipman's words in the Times. Publicly demand her head. Broadsheet journalism. Well, the standards have slipped right through the floor, haven't they? Anyway, at least 6 ministers are supportive of installing Lidington. Apparently the reason for this is because Lidington doesn't appear to have any genuine desire to be the Prime Minister. So maybe he will be palatable to the Conservative MPs in a wider sense, but to Conservative supporters at large as well. Wow, so there you go. A coup on Theresa May. It's all over the papers today. Now, her Chancellor, Philip Hammond, was on the Sophie Ridge show on Sky News this morning. Is she gone, Phil? Is she? Is she gone?
This is not about the Prime Minister or any other individual. This is about the future of our country. And changing Prime Minister wouldn't help us. Changing party in government wouldn't help us. We've got to address the question of what type of Brexit is acceptable to Parliament, what type of way forward Parliament can agree on, so that we can avoid what would be an economic catastrophe of a no-deal exit, and also what would be a very big challenge to confidence in our political system if we didn't exit at all. So we have to avoid both of those alternatives and find a way through the middle with a deal that works for Britain and guarantees our future prosperity.
Because according to reports today, your way through the middle is to try and see if David Lidington, the de facto Deputy Prime Minister, could actually become some kind of caretaker leader and steer Parliament through a deal. Is that false?
No, that's not right at all. My position is that this isn't about individuals. This is about how we move forward. The Prime Minister's deal is my preferred way forward.
Hammond is lying through his nicotine-stained teeth. He's a liar. Hammond has designs on the top job as much as Michael Gove or Boris Johnson or any other frontbencher you can name. So he's lying here, and Ridge knows he's lying.
Forward, but I'm realistic that we may not be able to get a majority for the Prime Minister's deal. And if that is the case, then Parliament will have to decide not just what it's against, but what it is for. Parliament will have to come together around a proposition that can gather a majority. And what I'm hearing in Parliament at the moment is lots of different ideas from different factions, but that won't solve the problem. Those backbench leaders of different groups have got to get themselves together in a room and decide what they can compromise on. Because if Parliament won't compromise we'll end up at the end of this process no further forward than we were at the beginning of it.
I mean, some people say that it's the Prime Minister, though, who is the roadblock to getting that kind of deal that you clearly so want. I can just show you the quote that one Cabinet Minister gave to the Sunday Times today. Cabinet Minister telling the Sunday Times, the end is nigh, she won't be Prime Minister in 10 days' time. I mean, there's a reason we have to ask these questions, because people will be very concerned about where we are.
The world watching will see that we have just over 2 weeks to complete this process before we get to the 12th of April, the new deadline that the Council has set last week. To be talking about changing the players on the board, frankly, is self-indulgent at this time. We have to decide how we want to proceed. Is it a no-deal Brexit, which I think would be a catastrophe? Is it no Brexit at all, which I think would massively undermine confidence in our political system? Or is it the Prime Minister's deal, and if not the Prime Minister's deal, some variant on it that Parliament can agree to?
Of course, it's not often mentioned anymore, but the Cabinet charged with taking the United Kingdom out of the European Union, that's Theresa May and senior Cabinet ministers, secretaries. The Cabinet itself is almost unanimously in favour of remaining in the European Union. It's very important to remember that. It's not often mentioned. I know there might be one or two people saying, and that goes without saying, well, it's forgotten in the confusion. It's forgotten. People don't realise the Cabinet was chosen specifically because the majority of men and women in it favour staying in the European Union. Got to mention that. To reinforce that point, Ridge asked Hammond about the second referendum and his stance on it now, because there will be a series of indicative votes next week, which means there will be a series of votes in Parliament to try and determine if there's any consensus for any one plan amongst MPs. This is tyranny, of course. The people voted to leave. There should be no discussions of plans or shall we go down this road or that road. Leave should have happened, and it should have happened just over 2 years ago. Should have been no Article 50 process. We should have just walked away. Anyway, so second referendum, Philip Hammond, who has, of course, stated in the past that a second referendum would be wrong, that the government, even though he's a Remainer, the government should really deliver Brexit. Has he changed his tune on a second referendum? Of course he has.
So I'm not sure that there's a majority in Parliament in support of second referendum, but it's a perfectly coherent proposition.
It's a coherent proposition now. Previously, it was an undemocratic one.
Many people will be strongly opposed to it, but it's a coherent proposition, and it deserves to be considered along with the other proposals that you've got on the list.
Yes. Another flip-flop. So what will happen next week then, and further down the road? What's likely to happen? Series of indicative votes. You know that the European Union agreed to delay the departure of the UK from the European Union by a couple of weeks. We were supposed to be leaving next Friday, but of course we're not. You know all this, it all happened last week. I won't bore you with it. In the meantime, May is allegedly going to try and get her agreement with the EU passed again by Parliament. For the third time, it was rejected twice. What's going to happen? Well, Matthew Syed is a journalist with The Times, and he was on Sky News last night, and he was speculating there about what's likely to happen now, and he's pretty candid for a journalist who writes for a Remain supporting newspaper. Here's Matthew Syed candidly explaining what is likely to happen, and I agree with him. This is the way I expect it to go to Matthew Syed.
And I think what might happen, I mean, if I had to put money on something happening next week that might prove to be decisive, it's that Parliament, in what I think will be a series of indicative votes, can create a consensus perhaps around a soft Brexit option, where we remain in very close regulatory alignment with the EU, we remain in the customs union or in some customs arrangement. And that will, as it were, avoid what they think of as a hard Brexit and still at least within the letter, if not the spirit of the referendum, would be leaving the EU. I have to say, I don't have a strong opinion about much on this. I feel deeply conflicted about the whole thing, but I'm very much against that as a solution. Because if we are a rules taker from Brussels, that's a dilution of our sovereignty. At least in the EU, we have a say in what the rules are.
Not really true. I'll come back to that in a few minutes about having a say about the rules. But it's good what he's saying there. He's saying that the consensus that might be reached and probably will be reached next week is around some sort of very soft Brexit, keeping the UK in some form of customs union and in the single market, in alignment with the European Union, which he said is not in the spirit of the referendum result. That's what Parliament will probably go for next week, and more than likely will then say we should put that to the people. Either that or Theresa May's deal, or that or no deal, or that or staying in the European Union. That's most likely. That will be an absolute tyranny, that. To say, we'll go back to the people and say, have this soft Brexit that we've dreamed up, which we won't be leaving. We won't be leaving at all, but we'll be subject to all these rules and regulations, and whatever tiny say we used to have, we will no longer have. Take that or take Theresa May's deal, or take that or stay fully in the European Union. So he's good here in what he's saying.
Brexiteers would be against that. They'd rather stay in the EU. Remainers would be against it. Going for the worst option as a way of appeasing, but I would rather test the empirical problem, either have a hard Brexit and see whether those who believe in it are right to say it's good for our nation, or stay in the EU. This wishy-washy middle ground is a stupid idea because it won't please either. It's the worst option, and the polarisation will continue.
Good stuff from Matthew Syed there of the Times newspaper. Ella Whelan was piping in there at the end. We won't hear from her because we don't have time. She writes for Spiked Online, and she's a supporter of leaving the European Union. 17 minutes past 11. You are with the Richie Allen Show Sunday View for March 24th, 2019. Let me go to the tweets because I know I get caught up in the programme and in doing it, and can sometimes forget the tweets. Base Ninja tweets, why are the political elite trying to say they've got confidence from the people pre-Brexit, yet are stating they'd have none if a second referendum or no Brexit happens? Surely I am not alone with never having any confidence in them. Yeah. I've had one or two tweets about difficulty connecting to the programme this morning. The stream is fine. It's being monitored always by a third and a fourth party, and I can see it visibly. There hasn't been any down in the stream. The programme is on richieallen.co.uk, but it's also on triggerwarning.tv, fabradiointernational.com. Just choose the option Fab Radio 2, and it's on tunein.com. If you go to tunein.com and look for The Richie Allen Show, you'll find it there. Alrighty. Dean tweets, get rid of May in March on the basis of the march in March, all because of decisions made by June. April can just sit this one out. I think you've confused even yourself there, Dean. But thanks. Susan says, yes, there were millions of us on the march back in February 2003. There were, and the upshot of that was not to roll back from the illegal, satanic, murderous invasion of Iraq. They went anyway. Isn't that true? They went anyway. Moving on. The Mail on Sunday, they've all got this front page about this coup against May and the possibility of David Lidington taking her place temporarily. But the Mail on Sunday is going with Environment Secretary Michael Gove, saying that he's the preferred caretaker leader. Right. The Sunday Telegraph front page, Cabinet told to oust May. But you know what? There's also a very interesting story on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph today. It is a story with a headline that reads, no need to stockpile medicine for no deal, Royal College admits. What? We were told last week and the week before that there was panic. There was panic in NHS England. There was panic amongst the Royal College of Medicine. There was panic everywhere because if we did leave with no deal, that we would run out of medicine. Now, the Royal College of Medicine is admitting there was no need to stockpile medicine. It was all a load of old balls. Drug supplies are very largely secured for the possibility of a no-deal departure, according to Professor Russell Viner, the president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. He said he'd been considerably reassured by the government's preparations for such an outcome. Addressing 19,000 members, Professor Viner said, contrary to many reports, there's no need to stockpile medicines and dissuade patients from doing so. It's important to tell patients there's no need to do this. In an email sent on Friday, Viner, a professor of adolescent health at the University College of London, said, I know that many of you will have been watching the news about Brexit, like I have, with feelings of uncertainty and increasing alarm. I felt it important to write to you directly about the implications for child and adolescent health and for our members. What did he say next? He said, I have been considerably reassured by government's preparations relating to supplies of medicine. You may be surprised by this, given some of what has appeared in the press. We do not believe there is a need to stockpile medicines and would encourage you to dissuade patients from doing so. It's all big bunch of scaremongering, and the media has been complicit in it. Lies and damned lies over the last 2 weeks about medicines running out. And all of those stories were timed to coincide with serious votes in the House of Parliament. Very important votes on certain amendments. These stories were broadcast on the day of those, the days even of those debates and of those votes, to panic the public. The Sunday Observer, front page headline, 1 million join march against Brexit as Tories plan to oust May. No surprise that the Remain supporting Observer is leading with the story of the march. Nonsense. Nonsense about this march. The march of the blissfully ignorant, the totally fucking clueless. Talk more about that in a minute. Two people who were at the march and who want the people's vote are Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat MP, and Caroline Lucas of the Green Party. The Judean People's Front has more members than the Greens and the Lib Dems put together. He's sitting over there. The Lib Dems and the Greens couldn't form a football team between them. Here's Ed Davey, Liberal Democrat, was on Sky Breakfast this morning. Ed Davey.
As Liberal Democrats believe there should be a people's vote to give the people the final say. She keeps dismissing that. So she's not listening to the opposition. And it's increasingly clear she's not listening to her own side. And you can't guide Britain through the crisis we're in at the moment if you don't listen to Parliament and the people. I was on this amazing march yesterday, a huge Liberal Democrat contingent in the over 1 million people, the biggest demo since the Iraq War. She needs to listen to the people. I think Britain is now a Remain nation, and the government and Parliament has to listen to that.
Look, we want to talk about the Prime Minister as a person as well in Cabinet. We'll get to that in a second. But in terms of listening to the people had a referendum. I mean, the Lib Dems are the one party who absolutely said they weren't going to listen to the people. I mean, even Vince Cable says, as he prepares to go, that has not necessarily done the party any good.
We say we should listen to people because we want a final say. What could be more democratic than a vote?
Honouring the result of the last one, I would have said.
Than a vote. And it's pretty clear from the opinion polls.
But we had a vote, and you said you stood against that view.
Good boy, Stephen Dixon. That's Stephen Dixon there. We had a vote. It wasn't that long ago, really. We had a vote, you know. People voted to leave, Edward.
But people in a democracy, as many of the Brexiteers say, are allowed to change their mind.
Oh, Christ. Well, you could be there forever then. Let's say, OK, people have changed their mind. Let's have a vote. And what do you do then if Remain wins? And if it's close, which it invariably would be, what do you do then? Come back again in May 2021 and do it all over again and do it every 2 years for forever and never implement anything because people occasionally change their minds. Referenda, which is the plural for referendums, and general elections are two totally different things. Referenda are taken and a referendum is decided, and when it is decided to hold one, it is done so on the general knowledge, and people totally understand that it is a generational thing. That whatever is decided will be decided for the very, very, very foreseeable future. Okay? For years. 10, 15, 20 years maybe. Nobody who voted leave was saying, well, we vote leave and that's it forever. You never know. In 50 years' time, there might be, or in 30 years' time, there might be a groundswell of opinion to rejoin. But in the meantime, you have a referendum. Everybody knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, a generational thing. It was pointed out many times by Cameron and Osborne, of course. Don't get it wrong, because there's no going back, people were told time and time again. More from Ed Davey.
And there's a lot of evidence. We saw the huge march yesterday. We've seen, in a matter of days, nearly 5 million people, it'll breach the 5 million mark, I predict, signing an online petition to revoke Article 50. And then, of course, we've seen the shift in opinion that the opinion polls have picked up, with a massive shift in opinion towards Remain. So I think for the government, That's
a pile of horse shit, by the way. There hasn't been any evidence that the polling, or there isn't any evidence that the polling is showing a trend towards Remain. That's nonsense. It's nonsense. Even the Remain supporting BBC and the Remain supporting Sky News have done polls which in 2019 alone, since January, show that there is a desire on behalf of the British public to just get this over and done with, to get out of the European Union, because we're sick of talking about it. You're sick of listening to it. You're sick of it. I know you are. I try and make it entertaining from time to time. I know it fails miserably. No stand-up comic am I. I know you're sick of it. There shouldn't have been this protracted, drawn-out process. It should have ended there and then on the 24th of June 2016. They voted to leave, we leave. Oh, well, you have to trigger Article 50. No, we don't have to trigger fuck all. We're gone. Goodbye. Listen, we're going to be mates. We're going to have a trade deal. We know we will, because you sell more to us than we do to you. So, listen, goodbye. No need for any negotiations. I've said this a million times. You don't negotiate your way out of your Netflix deal, do you? Do you? You just fucking leave Netflix. Or Amazon Prime, or whatever it is. I'm thinking of leaving. Yes, they do phone you. They are persistent little buggers, aren't they? They try and phone you and persuade you and offer you more stuff to stay. They've all got cancellation departments. Oh, don't, Richie, please. We'll give you 2 months. No, fuck off. I'm leaving. Oh, Richie, please. We'll give you unlimited. I'm leaving. And then you leave. Right? You're gone. And that's all we had to do. And there are people who are very new to this programme, and they generally get all their info from the papers or from the telly. So they listen to this and they think this is just hyperbole and conjecture. The Irish guy is full of shit. No, I'm not. There's no need to negotiate your way out of anything. You leave, full stop. I went to bed last night before the future Mrs. Allen. I left the room. I didn't fucking negotiate my way out of the room. Love, I'm thinking about leaving the room. I've had a straw poll with the dog and we've decided we're going to leave the room. I'll tell you what, let's have 6 months of fucking discussions about it. No, you leave. Leave. Gone. Full stop. Sever all ties just for a few minutes. And then they come running back to you, crapping in their trousers. Oh, listen, we got to have some sort of a trade deal now. That's what they would have said, because they sell so much into the UK. At which point we would have went, of course, let's just carry on the way we used to. You know? Let's not have any tariffs. Okay. But why did you leave? Well, I'll tell you why we left. In fact, I won't do that. I'll tell you in a minute. Before we do that, music. Let's just have some music. Let's all calm down. This is the Richie Allen Show, Sunday View for March 24th. Chrissy Hind and UB40. Love this.
They say we're young and new, babe.
Europe's most listened to independent radio show. It's the Richie Allen Show, Sunday View, Sunday morning, March 24th. It's one of my favourite cover versions of all time. I had a massive crush on Chrissie Hynde when that came out. Loved Chrissie Hynde back in the day. Gorgeous woman. What would I have been then? 85. I would have been 9. Hormones were raging, pre-pubescent young Irish boy, looking at the video for I Got You, Babe, and the lovely Chrissie Hynde, yeah. And you think of what kids are doing now for their sexual kicks. I was watching videos of Tiffany and Kim Wilde, yeah, videos. And Girls on Film by Duran Duran. Things have changed. We were innocent back then, weren't we? Oh, yeah. Now, you dirty bastard, Richie. Right, Ed Davey. Listening to Ed Davey, the Lib Dem talking about democracy. You know, honest to God, I was watching Sophie Ridge this morning and listening to Ed Davey. And I was thinking, as he was talking about democracy and the importance of people trusting democracy, because so many people have signed this petition. Millions are signing a petition to revoke Article 50. Yes, but in truth, the petition is entirely flawed because people are able to access it from overseas, non-English people, non-residents, and others have demonstrated that they've been able to sign it about 20 times. So it's all a load of old balls, really. But anyway, Ed Davey talking about democracy, and it got me to thinking, remember when Ed and his pal Nick Clegg and Vince Cable said vote Lib Dems and we'll abolish the tuition fees for students? Do you remember? Do you remember? And they fucking did. Students in their hundreds of thousands turned out to say, oh, thanks for that. Thank you for that lovely manifesto promise. Oh, thank you. And they went and they voted for the Lib Dems. And then the Lib Dems went into coalition with the Tories. Do you remember? Do you remember? And what did the Lib Dems do then? They unbuttoned their trousers, they squatted down and shat all over that manifesto promise and all over the students that came out in their droves to vote for them. Do you remember that one? Yeah. Caroline Lucas of the Green Party. We're not going... I could play some Caroline Lucas, but I'm not going to. Like I said, things that you think but you shouldn't really say, I'll say it anyway. The National Paedophile Association and the National Paedophile Appreciation Society has more members than the Green Party. So why would you pay any attention to Caroline Lucas, who addressed the 1 million people yesterday? 996,976 hadn't a clue who the fuck she was. So we won't hear from Caroline Lucas. I was going to do an EU thing. I don't know, because I think you're sick of it. You know, I talk about ignorance being bliss, and amongst the million people marching yesterday, ignorance is bliss. It's not intelligence. Can't confuse or conflate intelligence with ignorance. Some of the brightest people I've ever met are also the most not thick, but the most ignorant in terms of their lack of even the most basic understanding of one thing or another. These people demanding that the United Kingdom stays in the European Union are ignorant, not stupid, and I don't blame them for their ignorance. It's frustrating because if you decided to sit down behind a laptop and spend just 10 minutes reading reading the official website of the European Union, where it talks about what its institutions are, the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Council, and the Court of Justice, the 4 pillars, the 4 key institutions. Even somebody with only a basic understanding of words that have more than 2 syllables can understand that the European Union is a fascist dictatorship. If they could be bothered their backsides to actually read. Forget listening to the likes of this programme. Forget listening to anybody else and their strong opinions, which mine is obviously very strong. Forget me. Just by yourself go and have a look. Close your ears to all the noise around you and have a look. And this is what you'll find. There are 4 institutions, 4 pillars. The Commission, the Parliament, the Council and the Court of Justice. supposedly representing separate interests, the Commission representing the European Union, the Parliament supposedly representing you and me, the Council representing the governments of each member state, and the Court of Justice interpreting the law. That's the theory. But 'tis bollocks. It's nonsense. What happens in reality is that these institutions, the Commission, the Parliament, the Council and the Court of Justice, in fact are there to serve the interests of massive multinationals and financial elites who have been pushing forever and ever and ever for an integrationist agenda. Why, Richie? Why? Why have multinationals and the pharmaceutical and the oil cartels and the massive banks, why have they pushed for the European Union to be integrationist? Why? It's very simple, because massive multinationals, the ones I just mentioned, biotech, oil, pharma, they want to control everything in every country. But if all countries are sovereign and working in their national interest, that's national in block capital letters, it becomes hard, difficult, very difficult for the multinationals and the financial elites. Not impossible. I'm not saying that independent sovereign states working in their own selfish interest as a country is insurmountable for the cartels. It isn't insurmountable, but it takes a much longer time period to do it. And it could take centuries. And not only that, but it's open to more scrutiny. So while these massive elites can go after full spectrum dominance, even when countries are sovereign, it just takes an awful lot longer and they are more exposed, right? Right. But the European Union, that's what integrationism is. It becomes easier. So the plan all along, in my opinion, I know I've said this before, but it's important to repeat it today because I've not said this properly for about 3-4 months. Create a federal United States of Europe. Now, when I've said that in the past, I've had a couple of emails from nice people, decent people, saying, bollocks, Richie, you're a liar. This is just propaganda. This is your interpretation of the European Union, and it's unfair of you, as somebody who calls himself a real journalist, to perpetuate this narrative. That's what's been said to me in the past. However, it is totally true that it's a federal United States of Europe in the making. The European Union already has a flag. It's already got a parliament. It's already got an anthem. We've got an anthem, for Jesus' sake. Presidents, its own currency, a legal system, and it even has a navy. It does have a navy. Right? That's where it's going. So the European Union Commission then looks after all the treaties and it enforces European Union law. To make that very simple for people, the Commission is in effect the government of Europe, and it has a right, which is unique to it, to make laws which become law in the UK and every other member state. The Commission is made up of 28 unelected commissioners. They cannot ever be held to account by anybody. Not by MEPs, not by you, not by anyone. Very important. Jean-Claude Juncker, who spends most of his time pissed as a fart, rolling around, laughing in the Commission, in between trips to the bar, having the time of his life. He's the current president. Now, the Commission is lobbied and lobbied and lobbied and lobbied and lobbied morning, noon and night by special interest groups, through civil servants and bureaucrats. When the Commission proposes a law, right, so the Commission proposes laws. Members of the European Parliament cannot do that. So you vote in 751 MEPs. They have no right to come up with an idea for a law, to propose a law. They can't do any of that. It's all a charade. The Commission proposes laws and the Parliament votes on them. That's how it happens. And they're elected every 5 years. It's not a parliament. It's supposed to look like one. Basically to make the European Union look democratic, rather than give you and me a choice over who makes their laws. Give us an illusion. The Parliament can amend laws if it wants, and it does get the vote on them, but the Commission can veto any decision made by the Parliament, including throwing out the amendments. So do you see what I was describing a minute ago, how it's become true? Multinationals and financial elites used to have to get through 28 sovereign parliaments to get their way, to change laws to suit their corporations in individual countries. Not now, they don't. Now they just deal with the Commission. The 28 men. Is there a woman on the Commission? And they slip in these unelected bureaucrats, these civil servants, who've gone through the revolving doors, worked in these corporations, worked in pharma, worked in finance, to control the commissioners. If you control the commissioners, you change the laws. And the laws are adopted by the national parliament of each member state. And you might say, yes, well, you have a veto. You don't have a veto, because if a law has been passed by the Commission and the UK says, well, we don't like that law, tough shit, Paddy, if the majority of the other member states agree with the law. It's now law in the United Kingdom whether you like it or not. This is the European Union. This is the European Union. There's nothing democratic about it. Taking more and more power, concentrating it into the hands of a few people that are controlled by a few multinationals. And the public haven't a clue. And the reason why I've said this again today, and I did this about 4 months ago, is because every word of it is true. It's not a left versus right issue. It's not alt-right versus alt-left. It's not identity politics. It is the transference of power away from national parliaments and the people of individual countries to a bunch of unelected corporate-controlled puppets. That's it. It's a tyranny. The European Union army is on the way. I've talked about this for years. And in December, the European Union announced that it was going to be collecting taxes on behalf of member states. Taxes from the biggest multinationals in the world. Who do you think came up with that idea? The biggest multi-fucking nationals in the world did, of course. Hey, Brussels, how about you tax us instead of the UK government and the Irish government? That way you can tax us less. Oh yeah, good idea. Imagine that. And a blissfully ignorant in London yesterday, not stupid, blissfully ignorant, haven't a clue. Haven't a clue. They don't want to know. Well, give us an example. You don't have an example. I do. As was reported on this programme back in October, you'll remember this, dear listener, Italy's newly elected government, the coalition of Five Star and Liga, wrote a budget. Because they were elected, they had to come up with a spending budget for the country. And the European Commission said, no, we reject that budget, go back and do it again and write it the way we want to. And all of those poor Italians who thought, wow, this populist government that we've just voted in is going to stand up to the European Union. Yeah, look how that worked out for the Greeks when they put Syriza in power. Nobody stands up to the European Union. Not even these fake right-wing populist governments. No. What did the Italians do? Well, like their tanks with reverse gears, they reversed, went back and said, okay, we'll write it the way you want and we'll commit to spending plans dictated by you, Brussels. Thank you, Brussels. Thank you. It's a fucking tyranny. It's a tyranny. And to the snowflakes on the streets of London yesterday, I'm going to say it again, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss. Tried to talk to them about this. Don't want to know. You're a Tory. Couldn't be further from the truth. I'm an Irish Republican. I couldn't be any less of a Tory than you could imagine. Well, you're this then. No, I'm not that either. I'm just a bloke attached to nobody, to no party, to no ideology, telling you this is where your grandchildren's futures lie if you stick with the tyranny that is the European Union. If you don't educate yourself about it. It's exactly 13 minutes to the top of the hour. Don't I always drone on, don't I, about lots of things? Yes, I do. It's a tick, you see. It's a tick. It's a tick. I can't help it. I wake up, I drone on. I've droned on about this for years. Biometric cards that we'll all be carrying soon. Technology. And we are. Many of us are doing so already. The dangers I've talked about for years of paying for things via your phone, contactless payment with a card, etc. Travel cards. Touching your card to get on a train or a bus, a travel card that you top up with money electronically. Biometric cards to get you into a building. And I've talked about how dangerous this is for our personal freedom. Now, when I say I've talked about it, I have to be honest. I've talked about it with many men and women who've been researching this for years. People like the wonderful Pippa King, for example. Wonderful woman. Do you know how dangerous all this is for our personal freedom? Listen to RT with a great example on Russia Today of how the state can turn you off, switch you off, stop you in your tracks. This is a pretty scary story, but it's indicative of what's coming down the line and what's here already. RT, brilliant stuff this.
Students at King's College London claimed they were barred from attending classes because of their pro-Palestine activism. They were told it was because of security reasons during a visit by the Queen. Holly Boyker spoke to one of the students involved.
I went into uni, for my 11 a.m. lecture. It was 10 something, I'm not sure what time it was. I walked in, I got my ID card, I tapped it on the barrier and it wouldn't work. The barrier wouldn't open. I tapped it about 3 times, and by the 3rd time I kind of sighed to myself and I knew that this was intentional.
Maureen's a student at King's College London, but for one day this week, she wasn't. She was barred, while King's was hosting the Queen. Around the time of this grand entrance, on the other side of the building, the second-year religion and politics student was having this conversation with security guards.
I just want to know why my card has been cancelled.
It was requested that all cards are blocked until...
So who requested it?
The Metropolitan Police.
The Metropolitan Police profiled me.
Not profiling you.
They're not profiling me, so what are they doing then?
She wasn't the only one experiencing this issue.
You see what's happening there? You can't overstate that, and I can't exaggerate how wrong and how utterly terrifying that is. This young woman is a pro-Palestinian activist and has been and is known to be and is attending King's College in London. And on the day a member of the royal family is visiting the area, she's denied access to the university. Her card won't get her access to anywhere. She's basically switched off. You're done. And when she puts it to campus security, they tell her that the Metropolitan Police has authorised the switching off of her card. Wow, eh?
This issue.
And they play some footage of other students, again, who'd been active in certain causes, like Palestine and that, receiving the same treatment.
Maureen and her friends say that they've been politically profiled for their history of peaceful demonstrations over issues such as Palestine. Demos like this.
While you're sitting in this room laughing, there are people who are dying because of your actions, because of your refusal to take a stance against apartheid, against colonialism.
Maureen doesn't have a criminal record. She claims she was just singled out by her university for being a politically minded Muslim woman.
And I'm going to give you a bit of an exclusive now. One thing I've never done in my career is I've never invented sources, ever. I've never done that, given a bit of info and then invented a source. I've been told, and I did mention this last year, by somebody who works for a council, I can't say where it is, in this country, who works not as a councillor, not as an elected official, but somebody who works for a city council, has told me that ID cards are being planned for access to city centres. Not this year or next year, but in the early 2020s, ID cards will be needed to get into city centres. I've been told this. Now, I can't verify that this is true, but somebody who has been reliable in the past, very reliant in terms of giving me information, who does work for a city council in this country, has said that city councils have moved beyond discussing this based on terrorism. A biometric card for everybody in a town or a city, the perimeters of city centres barriered off, manned by hired goons. So you can only get into the city basically by using your card until they switch you off, eh? Palestinian activist can't enter the school that you pay £9,000 a year for, which she later told Polly Boyko. $9,000 a year for tuition. The Metropolitan Police said, don't allow her access. The Queen is going to be here. She can't get in to the library or to classes or whatever. Lovely. Washington Post this morning, really good editorial about Donald Trump and Israel and the Golan Heights. Trump, of course, on Thursday came out and said that Israel has the right to annex the Golan Heights, of course, disputed territory. It isn't disputed, they belong to Syria. Trump just doing what he does and what he has been doing since he was elected president. He is Israel's greatest ever puppet. Not to say that the ones that went before him weren't puppets either, they all were. But it's never been more obvious that a president has been controlled by Israel than Trump. Very interesting commentary here from Ali Abunimah. Abunimah is the editor of Electronic Intifada, and he was on RT over the weekend with Rick Sanchez. Now, Ali Abunimah, who is the editor of Electronic Intifada, is Palestinian, and the host said to him, well, hang on a second, Israel won the war, right? So therefore Israel is entitled to the land, right? Here's Ali Abunimah, he's very good.
That's not how it works, of course, because no country in the world except now, apparently, the Trump administration recognizes the Golan Heights as part of Israel under international law and UN resolutions which were supported by the United States. This is occupied territory, this is Syrian territory, and the basic principle of international law since World War II is the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war. Countries can't just invade each other and annex their territory. That's why after Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, there was a big international coalition which reversed that. This is no different legally speaking.
Okay, yeah, point well made. Let me challenge you on this then, about this concept or this notion that this author, Vicky Ward, is premising, which is that at no time ever has an administration been so loyal to an Israeli administration as is the Trump administration. Why do you think that's happening? What's your reaction to it?
Very good question. Why is this particular administration so blatant in its subservience to the apartheid state of Israel? Trump isn't any more loyal than Obama and W. Bush and Clinton. He isn't. It's unfair to say that he is. But why is he so blatant? Abunimah has got a good answer to that question. Why is Trump so in the pocket of the Israelis?
It's ironic, isn't it? Because so much of the mainstream media and political establishment claim that Donald Trump is Putin's puppet. But notice that the Trump administration has refused to recognize the Russian annexation of Crimea. But here it is recognizing in flagrant violation of international law the Israeli annexation of Syria's occupied Golan Heights. And I think, we've seen there's a couple of things at work here very briefly. One is the polarization in America over Israel. Support for Israel has become increasingly a right-wing, an extreme right-wing, and Christian fundamentalist cause. So this is Trump playing to the Republican base. But also, we've seen him put some of the most extreme pro-Israel people into top policy positions.
Let me stop you for a minute and ask me real quick about this whole Jared Kushner revelation.
This is very interesting. Rick Sanchez is a pretty piss-poor presenter. He starts talking about Jared Kushner and Netanyahu as if it's news, as if it just revealed itself in the last few days. Quite strange, this.
Revelation. Apparently, I didn't know that Jared's father and Bibi...
fair enough. I didn't hear that. He didn't know it. That's okay. There's no issue with that. There's plenty of things I don't know either. So I take it back.
Netanyahu are very close friends, and that according to some reports, Bibi Netanyahu would come to his house and actually stay in Jared's bed. He's almost like an uncle-like figure to Kushner. Jared Kushner is now in charge of all Israeli policy for the United States. What say you?
Well, it's certainly emblematic of the close relationship. You could say the U.S. and Israel are in bed together. But look, another name we need to mention here is Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon Adelson, the casino billionaire, the biggest donor to Donald Trump's campaign and inaugural committee. And in last November's midterm elections, Sheldon Adelson and his wife gave $100 million to the Republican Party. Adelson has made very clear that his number one priority is Israel. And so a lot of it comes down to, it's not a mystery, it's money in politics, and there is a lot of pro-Israel money in politics. And a lot of people are afraid to say that. When Congressman Ilhan Omar said the obvious, that pro-Israel money plays a massive role, everyone jumped on her and claimed she was anti-Semitic, but she wasn't anti-Semitic, and she was just telling the truth.
She was only telling the truth, of course. She was only telling the truth, of course. But what does the truth matter in this post-fact world? We're going to leave it there. That's it for Sunday View. Closing out with the Beach Boys, is it?
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you, Bermuda, Bahamas.
See you tomorrow, Monday at 5. Until then, bye now.